Hello and all that jazz. Welcome to a Festive Confessions podcast. Yes, it's an audio array of sinful Christmas tales from the very festive Radio 2 listener. They all wanted forgiveness, but more to the point, they all wanted a DAB radio. That's what's happening, really. So here we go with a Christmas collection featuring a foolish feathered fowl-up, Christmas card capers, a cheeky child charade, and the messiest midnight mass. This one comes from Neil. We'll put them all in a Confessions podcast so you can download them at the end of the week. So, Neil, you have a DAB radio for this, Dear Father Simon and the Festive Forgiving Collective at this time of joy and giving. Can I just take this opportunity to thank you for all the years of entertainment your show has given me, making many a dreary journey home an absolute pleasure.
It's like being on the Steve Wright Show.
Especially with the enlightenment provided by your wonderful sport, travel and financial presenters. Not forgetting, if this be read out on a Thursday, the delightful recipes showed out on a Foodie Thursday.
Flattery will get you everywhere.
Well, yeah, he's trying to swing the jury here, isn't he?
Yes, with your forgiveness now assured, I turn to my festive tale.
Absolutely.
This dates back to the early 70s, a time when the Christmas songs that now regale us, and whose royalties to this day still maintain the lifestyles of Messrs Holder and Wood and the like so handsomely, were fresh and, dare I say, slightly less tiresome. Indeed, this was the year when Slade first hit the top of the charts with Merry Christmas Everybody, so we're talking about 1973. I was then a mere youth of 14, and, as had become tradition at that time, the families on our street took it in turns every Christmas Day to host pre-lunch drinks. This particular year we went to our next-door neighbours, who had a particularly generous selection of whiskies and gins. As I was a mere youth, I, however, considered myself lucky if I were allowed a shandy bass. Different.
Yeah.
Calm down, Matt. Calm down.
Still going?
Different times. I don't know. I think you have a shandy at 14. That's fine. However, the same could not be said for the rest of the family, who returned home sometime later, having overdone the festive spirit. So you got the picture.
Yeah.
And so to the cooking of the lunch. As I was the only sober one, I was tasked with turning on the hob to cook the array of vegetables and, most importantly, the Christmas pudding. As this normally needed several hours in a steamer, the decision was taken to use the recently acquired state-of-the-art pressure cooker. For those younger listeners, this was literally a steam-driven early type of microwave, which that's an interesting description of it, which allowed food to be cooked more quickly. To prevent explosions, on top of the pressure cooker was a pressure release valve, which, if the pressure rose too high, would release it, emitting a screeching, wailing noise. People say, yeah, we had
I remember
one,
those, yeah.
As the cooking progressed, my sister-in-law took the turkey out of the oven, and with the help of her mother, and dexterity beyond their state of inebriation, slowly inserted a skewer into the thigh of the bird to check the juices ran clear and that the bird was ready to go. It was unfortunate, then, that as the skewer entered the flesh of the bird, that the pressure cooker reached its critical cooking temperature and the valve released a piercing screech. Convinced that the turkey was actually still alive, simultaneously my sister-in-law screamed and dropped the roasting tin, showering the succulent turkey, roasts and pigs in blankets across the entire kitchen floor.
Oh, no.
The scene of devastation only being overshadowed by the thud as her mother-in-law hit the floor, having fainted from the shock. She too thought that the turkey was still alive. Quite a scene in the kitchen, as you can imagine. So this is the confession bit, says Neil. Having used the pressure cooker before, I had realised that by pushing the release valve, you could actually make it screech to order. And I had chosen that precise moment to do just that. And so I must beseech your forgiveness, not for causing my sister-in-law to drop the turkey, or even for leading to her mother fainting, for they should have known better than to cook whilst inebriated, but for the rest of the family who had to eat Christmas lunch which had been scraped off the floor. And to all the family and friends who have had to endure this tale being retold every Christmas, since even now, my sister-in-law still believes that the pressure cooker screeching was an act of pure coincidence. Now seems to be the perfect time to say it wasn't coincidence, it was me, says Neil. P.S. I never did like turkey anyway. Merry Christmas, everybody. Thank you very much indeed, Neil. Well, you can just imagine the scene. And I remember the pressure cooker valve did make a screechy noise, and that's exactly the way he made it happen. Who'd have thought that the bird was still alive after all it had gone through? Sister Rebecca.
Well, that line, they should have known better than to cook while inebriated. I just can't concur with that, because can you imagine if everyone did that, there would be no Christmas meals cooked ever.
Is that right?
I believe most people are cooking having had a shandy or two. We've got a pressure cooker right now, and they are really frightening. Yeah, we use it for risotto and things like that.
Okay.
It's brilliant. So I can understand why they were terrified, but honestly, I mean, how much had they had to think the turkey was still alive after being in the oven for a few hours? So for that reason, I think it's quite a good joke, really, that Neil played on them, and they should have been a bit more sensible. So I'm forgiving.
Yeah, been in the oven a few hours and without a head and its innards. But anyway, apart from that, deadly.
I think I'll forgive as well, although it's ages and ages after the event, to be fair, wasn't it? And he did deliberately do it. And he should have confessed well before now,
But
to be honest.
to this day, they all thought it was a coincidence.
Yeah, well,
no.
exactly. No, I'll tell them anyway. But I forgive you. It was a good gag. What a good gag.
What about Matthew?
I still use our pressure cooker when I'm doing the Sunday dinner, so I'm a big fan of using that. And also, I'd agree with Rebecca, is that basically everyone, when you're doing Christmas dinner, we've all had a little bit to drink by that point. We've all of us have come back from wherever we've been on Christmas Eve and decided to make a start so that we can have a bit of a lie-in tomorrow, and sometimes things happen, but nobody's hurt, it's all fine, and it all gets sorted in the morning because it'll scrape all the bad bits off and everything's fine.
The food is all over the floor.
Well, but the body's built for that. We came out of the caves and were able to cope with a bit of dirt on the chicken. It's turkey.
And so therefore,
I'm going to forgive.
You are going to forgive.
Yeah.
So here's another seasonal confession. There is a DAB radio going out to Leslie. Thank you very much indeed for tonight's festive confession. Dear Father Simon and the collective Holy Order, in the words of A Christmas Carol, Marley was dead, but the truth is Eric and Elsie are dead. But before you all gasp, they never existed. Let me explain, in case that's completely foxed you.
Okay.
The tale starts 27 years ago. That's 27 years ago, when my brother and I were at tender age and made to sit and sign Christmas cards out to aunts and grandparents, which is when we came up with a cunning plan. You know those family newsletters that you get this time of year, full of nonsense about how wonderful the year has been and how all our children have been overachieving, saving the world and earning amazing money?
Yeah.
Do you get them?
Oh, yeah.
Do you throw them away without looking at them?
Obviously, all cards are treasured, and that's a very
Yes.
nice thing to say. But yes, we do.
Do you get newsletters, Bobby?
We get one,
Is it any good? Is it?
which amuses the rest of us.
Okay.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, we get a few, yeah.
I've written a few, but anyway.
Have you?
Well, because it's just a nice way of staying in touch. Shall I send you one?
No,
Okay,
thanks.
it's very good. Okay. All right.
Well, that was okay.
This might be the last we've heard of you. I think forget Thursday. How about... That's it. Moving on. So where were we? Oh, yeah. So we came up with a cunning plan. We decided that it would be funny to send a Christmas card to my parents from a totally fictitious couple who would fill them in on all their yearly goings-on and allude to meetings and occasions when we'd all met up. The card was posted and duly arrived, and my parents commented that they had similar cards from a well-known store, but then spent a good hour racking their brains as to who Eric and Elsie were, and agreed that it must have been someone that they'd met at various caravan rallies. So every Christmas for the last 17 years,
Wow.
Eric and Elsie have sent a card with an update about their lives, about their children. They now have grandchildren, their house moves, their illnesses, even to the point where their son has spent some time abroad. He's been married and divorced 4 times. He's driven a motorbike around the world. He nearly won a TV talent show. He's been in rehab. He's been in prison twice.
Wow, what a life!
But they're still really proud of him. Of course they are. And now apparently he's in a hotel in Bangkok. Anyway, he's had so many capers along the way. They've spoken about the times they relish drinking tea with my parents and how they must meet up before they're too old to manage it. They also managed to find the address of my parents in various house moves and also to congratulate them on marriages and children and grandchildren. They seem to know everything. As my brother and I both travel for work, We also find a different place to post the cards and ask friends to sign them and add a typewritten letter. And every year when we visit at Christmas, we're shown the card and asked if we remember who Eric and Elsie were. And we ponder who they might be, and we look at the postmark with puzzled faces. So, my friends, the time has come to confess that Eric and Elsie are not a couple. In fact, they never existed. So to my parents, I apologise for making them scratch their heads every Christmas as to who these total strangers are, and also admit that the capers were all concocted by their loving offspring over the years. Please forgive us, Mum and Dad. How amazing that they didn't know. And maybe Eric and Elsie have sent a card for this Christmas as well, full of lots of information. Well, guess what? It was your offspring who did that. I reckon there might be quite a few lies that have been told in newsletters across the years, I would think. Yes, we're so proud of our children. Anyway, so let's see what Sister Rebecca makes of this.
I've been we were sending the wrong Christmas card to the wrong address for 8 years. We didn't realise this. This reminds me of this. It was only last year that these people who kept receiving our Christmas card knocked on their neighbour's door and said, "Is this something to do with you?" And they realised
You've been sending it to a stranger.
Yeah, we were sending it to the wrong number. Ridiculous. But obviously this was intentional. I think it was very sweet of the children to do that. Obviously a lot of work went into it every year, and there was no harm done, just a bit of scratching of heads. So I think it's quite a sweet little caper they got involved in, so I'm going to forgive.
As Matt said, their son has had one heck of a life, hasn't
Wow,
he?
yeah,
He's been
some of
extremely active. Sister Bobby from the Priory.
It's inspired, actually. It's Leslie. How could I not forgive you? I think it's absolutely fabulous. I wonder if you've been slipping a few of your own kind of lifestyle home truths that you'd kept from your mum and dad in there into the life of this other person as you went along, because that'd have been great. And your mum and dad could have kind of gone, "God, that's terrible," and you're thinking, "Thank God they don't think that's me," and it really is me. Inspired. I wish I'd thought of this. I may actually start this out.
Yeah, I
It's
think
a great idea.
it is quite a good idea. Also, I'm just going to lie in all the newsletters.
Well, yeah. I mean, it strikes me that this is the kind of newsletter I'd have looked forward to reading, as opposed to the, Rory's composing piano sonatas at the age of 6, which is what tends to happen in most of them. So I definitely am going to forgive here, because it sounds like this was a lot of fun, and also a way of getting around the boredom of writing out the Christmas cards. So well done.
So here we have another festive confession, and thanks to Rebecca. This is another Rebecca, obviously, but we're using real names because there are prizes attached to each one. Oh, it's not a prize. Not a prize. It's
Not
a
a
gift.
prize.
It's a gift.
Everything's a gift.
prize.
Everything's a gift.
It's a gift. That's what it is, and we're gifting
Does
Rebecca.
that mean you can't change the names? Is that the condition?
Well, no,
Yeah,
I don't know,
I'm interested
really.
in the legal implications here.
no.
Very much so.
Well, I don't know. I'm just reading what's...
Just made it up, didn't you?
No, it says it's Rebecca. Anyway, I don't know. Dear Father Simon and the Merry Little Helpers.
Great.
My confession goes back just 2 years when my parents and my husband's parents came to stay with us and our 2 children over the festive period. Our children are boys. They were aged 11 and 8. On Christmas Eve, we settled into that old staple, a family game of charades. We tried Monopoly, but that ran out of steam, as it always does. Once I'd failed to secure Trafalgar Square, it was all over for me. Who really cares about the houses and bankruptcy bit anyway? Matt knows that this is true, really.
No, it's not.
You
actually.
will worry about it.
No.
You will worry about it
It's
eventually.
a high point of everyone's Christmas.
Everyone
is-
gives up after...
No, they don't. Not if you're playing with me, you don't.
No, we just say...
I bet.
Look, shall we just say Matt's won? Yeah,
Yes.
okay,
yeah,
fine.
yeah, it's easier. It's easier.
Fine.
It's easier. You win.
Done.
My mum then suggested that we play Happy Families, which was a great idea, but no one had any Happy Family cards.
Oh,
We did manage to play Twister, but
go on.
unfortunately my mother broke wind every time she moved.
Oh no! I've come a long way for this.
My son wrote about this on his return to school.
I'll bet.
Anyway, so charades it was. I had mimed Bridge Over the River Kwai rather brilliantly, I thought, even though no one guessed it.
Film
My mu-
title is Bridge on the River Kwai.
My mum had... That's why she didn't get it. My mum had tried the IT crowd, but that hadn't worked very well because she'd never heard of it. If she'd attempted Dr. Finley's casebook, she'd have nailed it. And so, it was my husband's turn, and he attempted to mime the film Nanny McPhee. For the first word, he pointed at my mum, his mother-in-law, or Nana.
Yeah.
Our 8-year-old son immediately jumped up, pointed at my mum and said, "Is it the Grinch?" I'm sure you can imagine the look of horror on everyone's faces and the "oh my goodness" comments followed by mortified laughter. Not too much laughter from my mum, I might add. And to make things worse, in an attempt to cover up his embarrassment, my son said, "Well, that's what you call her when she's not here."
Oh, no!
I'm sure you can picture the scene. Neither my husband or I knew what to say. We were so horrified. My mum was attempting to take it all in good humour, but was clearly rather upset. Our other son, along with my dad and my husband's mum, were crying with laughter. My mother-in-law's husband said nothing as is usual, and my husband and I had no idea what to say. I think we laughed a bit, but to be honest, it's all a bit of a haze. Forgiveness on 3 counts, please. Not for my son, but for my husband and I. Firstly, for raising such a rude child. I can honestly say we never, ever used the word Grinch, honest. Secondly, for our lack of parenting and social skills in simply not knowing what to say or do to our son or my mum, and so trying to cover it all up with embarrassed laughter. Sorry, Mum. Finally, Father Simon, me and my husband seek forgiveness for literally crying with laughter once all the kids and the grandparents were safely tucked up in bed and we were finally on our own. My parents still come for Christmas every year, and we've never spoken about it since, although we do dine out on the story quite regularly. The Grinch episode has never been mentioned since. I eagerly await yours and the collector's forgiveness. It's a dangerous game, charades, or give us a clue.
I never knew it was that dangerous.
Well, it can be. It can be. Who knows what the truth of it is, but you can clearly see that if you're going to do Nanny McPhee or the Grinch, something like that's going to get you into all kinds of trouble. What do you say, Sister Rebecca?
I think Rebecca's in denial because I think they must have mentioned the fact that she was like the Grinch, because children always tell the truth about this kind of thing. So you sort of think, oh, we can't possibly have called her the Grinch, but you probably did. You just can't remember it, because there's no way that the child would have got that from nowhere.
That's a good point.
So I think, therefore, even though it's harsh, I'm not forgiving.
Not forgiving.
Ooh.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
It's Christmas. It's Christmas.
What does the Dean say?
I think I will forgive. I think children do make things up occasionally, and they get mixed up as well. So you might have said the Grinch at another time. And from the story, did Nan know who the Grinch was? What the Grinch was?
I don't know. Well, I think it's quite clear that the fact she wasn't that impressed.
Because everyone was laughing.
Maybe she was still
presumably.
recovering from the game of Twister.
So I don't think that much. Yes, it's true. No, I don't think that much harm was done really, and it was good fun.
It is
and
a problem that
it is.
Twister
No,
game.
it is tricky. I don't know what I've done. I don't know what else I'd have done from Nanny
Can be.
McPhee, to be honest. Yeah. It's a dangerous game. So I'm going to forgive.
Brother Matthew.
Yeah, let's move away from Twister. And talk. Here's the thing: is that obviously the root of this problem is when you talk about people you know in front of your children, and they then repeat that to the people you know. And obviously, myself and my wife have never exchanged critical words about anyone we ever know.
Really?
But
I think that's not
Yeah,
true.
you're
That
just not the
said,
type.
we did come up with a system of using code words for those people when we were talking about them in front of our son. Well, we're not going to tell you what the code words are now.
tell us the code. We want the codes.
But that way we knew he would never then repeat it about that said person in front of said person.
Code word Grinch.
No, it was something else. It was basically we would use code words
The
of
old bat from the cupboard.
No, we just use you'd use the Charlie would be for the person with the letter C, Sierra for S, that kind of thing, and it worked very well. So I am not going to forgive because you didn't come up with a decent enough system. It's your own fault.
Systems.
Yes.
Oh, right, so if the system had been all right, then that'd be okay.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been fine.
Andrew sends this in. Thank you, Andrew. My confession dates back to the different times, early 2000s. Well, not that different. I've suppressed it for quite a while, but the prospect of a DAB radio and the dawning realisation that I might at some earlier point in my life have been a bit of an idiot compels me to confess. I was at the time of this confession's origin enjoying an irresponsible phase of my life. A late 20-something, I had enough money for beer, but few real responsibilities to worry about much. In fact, one of my very few worries was the alarming number of friends who were settling down, getting married and, God save us, starting families. Whilst okay to start with, this "oh, I'm sorry I can't come out, I need to look after the kids" was seriously starting to impact on my lifestyle. Chief example being the dwindling support for my calendar highlight, Christmas Eve in the pub. Father Simon, this had been a well-established tradition in our circle of friends. Better than New Year's Eve, more fun than birthdays. This annual cornerstone of well-mannered fun and frivolity was universally agreed to be the very spirit of Christmas. Fast forward 12 years since our tradition's inception, and it's definitely on the wane. One of the few reliable stalwarts of this tradition that I actually liked is my best mate and one day to be best man, and he's called Ben. And even though he himself had only recently got married, he'd promised me this night would still be ours, because we were friends and friendship was what Christmas was all about. Ours, that is, with one important caveat. He absolutely couldn't drink too much, because he'd promised to take his grandmother to midnight mass, a promise sworn to his parents who were away that year and were relying on him to meet Grandma Ben, as she was known, a few minutes prior at her bungalow down the road and take her the few steps to the church nearby. Fair enough, I thought. Most of our locals would have stopped serving around then, and this way everyone's a winner. I started to look forward to Christmas Eve all the more. So Father Simon, the night arrived, and the few of us, still with a sense of priority, met at the prearranged pub at 6 o'clock, all that is apart from Ben. An hour later, Ben hadn't arrived, but he did call. I answered expecting to hear an apologetic man hurrying to the pub. Instead, unfortunately, I heard a very stressed and panicked Ben explaining that his wife had to be taken to hospital, having slipped on ice whilst they were taking their Christmas shopping in. "Does that mean you'll be a bit late?" I asked. "No," Ben replied, somewhat sternly to my surprise. "It means I can't make it at all. They need to do some scans and there's no way I'm leaving Cheryl. They think her leg might be broken." "Really?" I whined. "It's Christmas. What about your mates?" Ben was unmoved, so we agreed to leave this as a difference of opinion.
Oh, really?
Through gritted teeth, I wished his wife a speedy recovery, reminding him where he could find us if he'd changed his mind. At about 8 o'clock, I was surprised to receive another call from Ben. Once again, he's not sounding like a repentant man on his way to the pub. He's sounding stressed. "I forgot about Grandma," he explains. "She's got to get to Mass, but there's no way I can make it. Cheryl hates hospital. I can't leave her here. I have to get her home. Is there any way you could take Grandma to Mass?" Father Simon, I'm not proud to say that for some time I argued against this stupid idea. She wasn't my grandma, and this was likely to really ruin my special night. He's coming out of it very well, Andrew, isn't he? In the end, however, under a barrage of calls and texts, I relented, reluctantly. I promised to drink a sensible amount, to leave a bit early and to pick her up from the bungalow, escort her to Mass, sit with her whilst it went on, then walk her back. In fact, for this somewhat selfless act, I actually extracted a promise of 10 more years of Christmas Eve, irrespective of families, wives, hospitals or children. So, with a prompting of quite a few text messages, I ended the night bidding farewell to my mates as I wobbled down the road to the sheltered housing, quietly hiccuping, praising my Christmas spirit and cursing Ben's. I reached the mini housing estate where Ben's grandma lived. It was one of those reserved exclusively for retired people, with 10 similar homes on a mini estate. I marched forward to Grandma Ben's home, and it dawned on me at this point that I wasn't exactly sure which bungalow was hers. Oh, no. I had been there before, but now it all looked a bit different. Yeah. In fact, come to think of it, other than Grandma Ben, I wasn't 100% sure what she was actually called. However, I was struck with a brilliant realisation. Lights! There's only one of these little bungalows with lights on. Patting myself on the back, I hurried to the door and knocked loudly and shouted, "Come on, Grandma, it's time for church!" After a few more hearty knocks, Grandma Julie came to the door, although to my dismay she didn't really look ready to go. Oh, no. Ben had promised that he'd phone ahead, but perhaps he'd forgotten or something. So I rapidly explained I was Ben's friend, here to take her to Mass. No time to waste, I enthusiastically exclaimed. We don't want to miss the best bit. So I promptly bundled her out of the door, down the road and into the church. I confess I dozed off next to Grandma Ben during the service. The oldies seemed to be enjoying it though, and before too long it was time to go. With me once again bundling Grandma Ben back out as soon as possible, I escorted her back to the bungalow, gave her a peck on the cheek, wished her a happy Christmas, said I hope we'd see her again soon. Once again praising myself and wobbling down the road to my own house, and in the back of my mind wondering about the slightly bemused look on Grandma Ben's face. I know you're ahead of me. Well, this is the confession. You see, I had a very confusing conversation with Grandma Ben a few months later. Meeting by chance in our local supermarket, she came over to ask how I was doing. She also said in passing, "Don't worry about Christmas Eve. I know what you boys are like. A few drinks down the pub, it's easy to lose track of time. Don't worry, I didn't mention it to Ben. I just saw myself to church." It was a lovely Mass. Surprise turned into horror as I figured out later what these words actually meant. It appears that in a haze of Christmas spirit and owing to poor timekeeping, I actually missed Grandma Ben and as a result inadvertently abducted the only elderly lady still awake at that time. Not stopping to hear her surprised questions, I effectively bundled her in and out of a Mass, kissed her on the cheek and disappeared. So I seek forgiveness from not Grandma Ben in case she didn't actually want to go to church, forgiveness from actual Grandma Ben for making her walk on a night when strange men walked the streets, and forgiveness perhaps from Ben for not being a bit more understanding. In my defence, I've never since had my Christmas tradition because the year after that I married, then we had our first kid. What with all that going on, it seemed a bit silly to faff around in the pub. Every year I think of this story and I like to unburden myself, and I'd also like to have a DAB radio, please. Well, I reckon, Andrew, let's see what the council here think, but maybe you should donate your DAB radio to Grandma Ben, or not Grandma Ben, whoever you can find, Sister Rebecca.
I don't think not Grandma Ben was particularly... I mean, I think she was pleased about being taken to Mass. It sounded like she kind of enjoyed the company,
Maybe.
actually. And Grandma Ben was fine because she made her own way there, and she seemed very understanding about the fact that she knew they were going to have a bit to drink. I just love the way that exposes the gap between people before they have children and after. And we've all been there. We've all had single friends who say, oh, yeah, why don't you come out? What are you doing? What do you mean you've got to
What, you're not coming at all?
And then the minute they have children, they change their view. So for that reason, I'm going to forgive.
The novice, what do you say there?
He didn't mean to granny nap. It was completely unfortunate that, and we all need a grandma called Ben, Bert, or even Bobby. I used to have an Auntie Willie actually, and bless her. And
that's another confession for another day.
Indeed,
next year
indeed.
maybe.
But he did see her to church, even though it was the wrong granny, and he was best intentioned. And bear in mind, he started coughing at 6 in the evening, and this was midnight mass, so he did well. But not just to slumber in church, he did very well. So forgive him,
Brother Matthew.
I think Andrew tells this story knowing he doesn't come out of it particularly well.
Correct.
But I would argue, what better way to exemplify the spirit of Christmas than by having a strange man turn up at your front door and insist that you go to midnight mass with him, and then he falls asleep next to you. No, that is what Christmas is all about, I would say.
We've all been there, is that what you're saying?
We've all been there.
Yes.
We've all done it, and actually they're pretty used to that at midnight mass, in my experience. So I am going to forgive, obviously.
Well, they were the festive confessions, all DAB worthy. If you have a confession and you think it'd be good to start the new year because the show is back on January the 4th, on an email, please, confessions@bbc.co.uk. And if you have a moment, all the guest interviews are online. Cecilia Ahern in the book club talking about the Marble Collector. Jules Holland and Ruby Turner with the Boogie Woogie Christmas on Tuesday. Dr. Mosh laid out his festive platter of rock. Sorry, it looks fine, but it sounds terrible. We had a Chris Mosh on Wednesday. It's a festive treat, that's what that is. And Nige did a Mexican Christmas. Of course, what more could you want? I hope you find something good that's there. Our First Confessions podcast will be dispatched for you on Friday, the 8th of January. I'm back on January the 4th. Have a happy Christmas, happy New Year. See you in 2016.